Hello, BookTube. It's Friday, and I have some books to show you for Friday reads on this beautiful, warm, sunny summer afternoon here in Boston. Just high summer at its picturesque perfection. I know that most of the world is broiling hot in record-breaking temperatures, but right now, Boston is not. So I've got 6 books I want to show you. They are all over the map, as usual, including all over the age groups. And the first 3 are books that I have read. And the first of those 3 is also my answer to today's Reading Rush challenge, which is to read a book whose main character is not human. The first of those that I have to show you is Mackenzie Lee's book, Loci, Where Mischief Lies. Mackenzie Lee is the author of, what was it called? A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue? Bit of a minor hit in the YA circles. And this is a YA novel starring Loki as a boy, a young Loki. Who comes to... Well, actually, let me read it to you. Before the days of going toe-to-toe with the Avengers, a younger Loki is desperate to prove himself heroic and capable, while it seems everyone around him suspects him of inevitable villainy and depravity, except for Amora. Some of you comic book fans will know that name. Asgard's resident sorceress in training feels like a kindred spirit, someone who values magic and knowledge, who might even see the best in him. But when Loki and Amora cause the destruction of one of Asgard's most prized possessions, Amora is banished to Earth, where her powers will slowly and excruciatingly fade to nothing. Without the only person who ever looked at his magic as a gift instead of a threat, Loki slips further into anguish and the shadow of his universally adored brother Thor. When Asgardian magic is detected in relation to a string of mysterious murders on Earth, Odin sends Loki to investigate. As he descends upon 19th century London, Loki embarks on a journey that leads him to more than just a murder suspect, putting him on the path to discover the source of his power and who he's meant to be. And Amora, those of you who are comic book fans, will not be surprised by the fact that she turns out to be something of a villain in this book, a far more cut-and-dried black and white villain than Loki is. This is very much the movie characterization of Loki, the current characterization of Loki in most Marvel comics and in the movies is of a sort of an anti-hero, sort of a rapscallion, self-interested, able to ally with evil, but not really wholly evil himself. I think Marvel sort of went in on that characterization of Loki when they realized they had a great young actor to play him on the big screen, and that has sort of followed suit. I, of course, read the comic book Thor for 50 years where that was not the case, where Loki was an out-and-out villain, just a monster, constantly threatening all life on Earth, constantly threatening to kill Thor, and constantly being banished, one horrible and ineffectual banishment after another, by his adopted father, Odin. This book is a little more layered than that, in fact, a lot more layered. I like the way this author writes. This is, at times when it needs to be unapologetically violent, and with good, well-drawn characters. I, of course, had my questions about Loki in 19th century London, or Loki being a boy at all. I mean, it's difficult to know what to do with this character if you're writing him for a YA audience. You want to give him a sort of recognizably modern Western setting, but the character is thousands of years old, so I think this book straddles that line about as well as you could expect a book to do. Tremendously enjoyable, and once again, I know that that matters to some of you, but teenage and preteen boys who are maybe falling out of love with reading, maybe you read to them when they were little and now they're starting to view it with a fishy eye. Around the time when girls embrace reading wholeheartedly, boys tend to drop away from it. That's a subject for a whole video on its own, but they know the movies. Those boys know the movies, and they like the fact that Loki isn't a straight-up hero, and this book will grab them. So if that's an issue, definitely keep it in mind. I think this comes out in August. Oh no, this comes out in early September. So this is early September. Then the next of the 3 that I have read, I have recommended on this channel many times. I will keep recommending it throughout the rest of the year, and I believe I will also have a chance to recommend it when it comes out in an freaking-enormous paperback, probably in 4 years. This is a huge book, absolutely huge. It's by Edoardo Albanati. This is The Catholic School in a finished copy. Finished copy has all the rapturous blurbs that it got in the Italian press. It's an 1,100-page novel. It's an example of autofiction, and you would think for all those reasons that I would dislike it, and I thought it was brilliant. Even in English translation, I thought it was brilliant. Let me tell you a little bit about it here. The winner of Italy's most prestigious award, the Strega Prize. The Catholic School is one of the most arresting and haunting works of European literature to have appeared in the 21st century. I actually agree with that. I would ordinarily scoff at that for hyperbole, but I think that might be true. In 1975, 3 well-off young men, former students at Rome's prestigious all-Catholic high school, San Leone Magno, brutally tortured and raped 2 young women, killing one of them. The crime, known as the Cicero Massacre, shocked and obsessed all Italy, exposing the violence and dark underbelly of the upper middle class at a moment when the traditional structures of family and religion seemed to be under threat. It is in this environment, the halls of San Leone Magno and the homes of the families who sent their sons there in the late 60s and 70s, that Edoardo Albanati takes as his subject the Catholic school. His experiences in school, as well as his reflections on his adolescence and the forces that produced the toxic culture of contemporary Italy, add up to a remarkable blend of memoir, coming-of-age novel, and true crime story. And I agree with that. This is a book that defies easy characterization. It is a massive undertaking. It took me forever to read, and it took me forever to reread, but I stand by it. The international press on this thing is far more adulatory than the 1 or 2 English language reviewers who have tackled it so far have been, and they are wrong. They are not getting into the spirit of the thing. Let's just put it that way. Curious to see. This comes out, I think, in August. When is this? Is this August? Yeah, this comes out in mid-August. I'm curious to see what kind of critical reception it will get in the mainstream, not the journal reviews, but mainstream reviews. I'm wondering if it will get any. It's a major undertaking to send a thing like this to a reviewer and expect them to do anything with it in any kind of time. Not everybody use me. And then the third book that I want to show you that I have read is a kid's book. It's by Mike Unwin, and it's illustrated by Jenny Desmond, and it is called Migration. It's a big picture book all about animal migrations of all kinds. So you have hummingbirds, butterflies, bats, whales, and at the end there is a map to help show kids where all these migrations are taking place and how much space they cover. I loved it. The artwork isn't. The artwork is just. It's very photorealistic. It's basically artistic renderings of animal photos, but the subject is fascinating and endless. I've never brought up large-scale animal migration with little kids before, when it didn't just hold them rock solid in their place, wanting to know everything about it, just everything about it. Because most young kids, if you tell them elephant, they think Africa. If you tell them butterfly, they think, okay, there are butterflies in the summertime. If you tell them birds, they think, okay, there are birds at my bird feeder, or whatever. So telling them the details of butterflies flying thousands of miles on wings thinner than film, if you know the details, if you know how to make a story out of it, they just love it. So I highly recommend this thing. And then we have 3 books that I have not read for this Friday Reads. First one, I haven't read this volume. I did read the first volume in this series, and I was not impressed by it at all. In fact, I disliked it immensely. But I want to give it another try. This is an author who has enormously pleased me in the past, over and over and over again. I'm sure she's pleased you as well. This is A Capital Death by Lindsay Davis. And this is a Flavia Albia novel, not Gordianus the Finder, or rather Falco novel. She wrote, in the Falco series, she wrote probably 20 novels, starting with The Silver Pigs, all about her tough-talking Roman detective, Marcus Didius Falco. And these novels, I think there have been 4 of them so far. Oh goodness gracious, this is the 7th. These are, let me read this to you. A man falls to his death from the Tarpeian Rock, a southern summit of the Capitoline Hill, which overlooks the Forum in ancient Rome, and was a traditional place of execution for traitors. While it looks like a suicide, one witness swears that she saw it happen and that he was pushed. Normally, this would attract very little official notice, but this man happened to be in charge of organizing the imperial triumphs demanded by the emperor. The Emperor Domitian, autocratic and erratic, has decided that he deserves 2 triumphs for his so-called military victories. The triumphs are both controversial and difficult to stage because of the not-so-victorious circumstances that left the Roman army without treasure or captives to be paraded throughout the streets. Normally, the investigation into this suspicious death would fall to the relevant aedile, one Tiberius Manlius Faustus. However, as he's still that's a Roman official who investigate crimes in their neighborhoods. However, as he's still recovering from a tragic lightning strike on their wedding day, his wife is worried about his stamina and decides to step in. She is the private informer Flavia Albia, daughter of Marcus Didius Falco, and what a mistake getting involved turns out to be. The deceased was none too popular, and with far too many others, with much to gain from his death. And so this is Lindsay Davis solving one of the besetting problems of an ongoing murder mystery series, which is how many adventures can your one character have, and will you ever get tired of writing about them? She solves that dilemma in a natural way by having Falco's daughter take up the mantle of private investigator and start solving crimes. And the only problem with that I had with the first of these, the first volume in this series, was called The Ides of April. I think that's the one I reviewed. Is that when Lindsay Davis has Flavia Albia descend into the demimonde of ancient Rome, the way she had Falco do in 20 novels before her, he has her, tough-talking ex-gladiators and out-fighting hardened street thugs, and that would not happen. I was reading it and I was thinking, okay, this is no more believable than Legolas the Elf. But if you made an ancient Roman murder mystery series, and you called it A Capital Death or The Ides of April or whatever, and you set the scene and you had the murder, and then on page 21 you introduced Legolas the Elf, your readers would desert you entirely. And yet, because they've been schooled by 21st century movies, in which 90-pound willow-thin women action heroes routinely punch out bruisers from the Russian KGB or whatever, readers, I think, take this with... Maybe I just need to be in the right mind frame. Maybe I need to suspend more of my disbelief. But I'm going to try this again. I haven't looked at any of the other books in this series because that first one struck me as so blatantly unbelievable. I'm not saying you couldn't have a female detective in ancient Rome. It's been done, and it's been done very convincingly. But they couldn't just be female men. That wouldn't work. They'd get their throats slit in the first half of the first book. So I'm going to give this a try. And see if maybe I was just in a gripey mood. Maybe I was just missing Falco, or if there are still liberties taken with the laws of physics. I don't know. We'll see. Then this next one is a finished copy by Ronald Rossbottom called Sudden Courage, about young people who fought the Nazis in occupied France and mostly died for it. This is their stories, and I have the advanced copy, but I haven't got to it, and I have the finished copy to give me a shot in the arm. This has great blurbs from authors that I like, and also, not incidentally, great cover art. It's not a faded sepia-tone photograph. I often complain on this channel about how history works in the American press. This is by Custom House. Seem to go out of their way to give their books incredibly boring covers, and this is a perfect example of what happens if you don't do that. This is incredibly more eye-catching than a faded sepia-tone photo would be. So I'm going to be giving this a try now that I have the finished copy. This is how fun circus sounds. It's not just a siren, it's whooping and luring. Lots of fun sounds. Huh? Why shouldn't you be entertained while you set your house on fire? Okay, it's every 15 minutes, so if I make a video that's around 15 minutes long, it's going to happen. Then this next one comes out in December, but I'm really interested in the subject matter. This is Dangerous Melodies by Jonathan Rosenberg. Classical music in America from the Great War through the Cold War. There's Van Cliburn in his Victory Parade. And this is let's see here. This book vividly evokes a time when classical music stood at the center of American life, occupying a prominent place in the nation's culture and politics. The work of renowned conductors, instrumentalists, and singers with the activities of the orchestras and opera companies were intertwined with momentous international events: 2 world wars, the rise of fascism, and the Cold War. Jonathan Rosenberg recovers the politics behind classical music, showing how German musicians were dismissed or imprisoned as the country's music was swept from American auditoriums during World War I. Yet 20 years later, these same compositions could inspire Americans in the fight against Nazis, while Russian music was deployed to strengthen the U.S.-Soviet alliance. During the Cold War, Van Cliburn's triumph in the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow became a cause for Americans to celebrate. And Jonathan Rosenberg is a professor of 20th century U.S. history at Hunter College and the CUNY Graduate Center, and is the author of How Far the Promised Land, World Affairs and the American Civil Rights Movement from the First World War to Vietnam. And the subject is irresistible to me. I know a lot of the anecdotes. I know a lot of the stories. So I'd be interested to see what kind of larger picture the author writes of this. So I'm gonna read ahead anyway. Now that we're on the doorstep of fall, we have one summer month to go through, and then the autumn is starting, whether we want it or not. So I am going to start to range a little bit further afield, depending on how interested in the book I am. And I'm going to reread, something like this anyway when I get it a finished copy. So that is your Friday Reads, plus Reading Rush. We have Dangerous Melodies, about the political and social role that classical music has played in the last century. We have Sudden Courage, another World War II sort of keyhole history, this time about courageous young people fighting the Nazis covertly in occupied France. Then we have A Capital Death, a Flavia Alba novel by Lindsay Davis, her new Roman murder mystery series. I'm going to give it another try. Then a big kids book called Migration, all about the massive journeys. They're unbelievable. Even when you read just the flat facts of them, they seem unbelievable. Kids will love them. And then we have The Catholic School by Edoardo Albinati, one of the great works of literature to appear in English this year. It's a translation, but still. And lastly, we have Loci, Where Mischief Lies, by Mackenzie Lee, who's a young adult author a lot of you will know. I think a lot of you probably read A Gentleman's Guide to... what was it? What was the book? A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. And a lot of you probably read that and liked it. So that's a nice all-over-the-map Friday Reads for you. And also The Reading Rush, and also A Death Siren. The only thing that's missing is Frida, but she's off somewhere else, snoozing on her own. The minute it gets a little bit warm in this place, she starts to want to just go off and snooze, as opposed to play or cuddle. And unfortunately, even though it's only around 80, that's warm for her. I think in the next week, in the next 4 or 5 days, Boston is predicted to get 3 days that are around 90 instead of around 80. We shall see. I haven't looked at the meteorological data myself to know if there's any chance of that. But once it gets up around 90, especially if the humidity is there, then I have to watch my being. I have to cool her down as much as possible. Right now, she's just a little warm, so we'll wait until the sun has lost its strength. It's where it's still in the sky, but it's definitely setting. We'll wait until then. Then we'll go for a nice long walk, and that won't be too hard on her. But anyway, free to update because you don't have Frida to look at. But I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.